Hello, everyone, and welcome to Crime in Court. This is the trial of Richard Allen, or also known as the Delphi homicides, Indiana versus Richard Allen. And as we know, he has been convicted for 130 years and for the homicides of Liberty German and Abigail Williams. They were 14 and 13 at the time, respectively, at the time of their homicide. So, if you follow my channel at all, we are of the belief that the state did not prove Richard Allen's guilt. I I don't think he's involved at all, personally. I believe that there are some other suspects that law enforcement didn't look at or for whatever reason are covering up for. So I don't know, maybe law enforcement is involved even to some extent. So that's my take. That's kind of where this channel lies. And hopefully you guys, you don't have to believe what I believe, but it just really seems suspicious what's going on in this case. And now that the trial's over and we had no transparency because Judge Gull did not allow cameras, we had a lot of really awesome people that did some great reporting that left out the emotion or their own personal bias when reporting. So we did get a lot of what came out at trial, but of course, we weren't there and we didn't have the opportunity to view it virtually. So we just don't know what happened at trial. But we do know um, that the investigation just doesn't add up. And part of that investigation is, as you can see on this thumbnail, is Jerry Holman, the lead investigator. And immediately following the sentencing of Richard Allen, Jerry Holman went out and did kind of a press tour. And it was an odd press tour because, as he says, everything about Richard Allen was odd. Like in his interviews to these other content creators, he's come out and said, um, to the extent, basically, like that was odd to me. That was odd. That was odd. So he obviously thought that there were odd things that made him think Richard Allen was guilty of these crimes, whatever that may be, or however wrong or mm, not wrong it is. All right, so let's get into the content here. So I'm going to be reading through the transcript. I hope I don't get copyright copyright stricken. This is fair trial use. I'm providing my own commentary. So I'm just putting that out there. We're going to be reading through a transcript from another YouTube creators channel where they interviewed Jerry Holman. This was on December 27th was when this interview took place. And you guys can follow along on the screen or just sit back and relax. This is audio only. I'm still recovering from hip surgery. I'm getting better at sitting up, so I think soon I'll be able to go back to the other side of where I lay on the bed and I'll be able to do my setup. It's how I normally do it. So soon we'll be back to the camera soon, but right now we are voiceover only. Please hit the like button and let's begin. So the true crime host, I don't want to say their name because I don't want to call attention to their um copyright. They were on a copyright rampage. Anyone who viewed their video online, like on their own channels. And then there's also the other channel who I read through the transcripts, and they were also doing some copyright striking of the juror interview that just came out. So I do want to go over that, but I'm not sure if I'm going to get a copyright strike on going over the juror interview with another podcast or another creator. So we'll see if I'm able to do that or not. I'm going to look into that more. But so be on the lookout for potentially seeing that, but I might not be able to. All right, anyways, so let's begin. The host says, "Hello. We have a very special program for you today. This is Lieutenant Jerry Holeman, who was a big investigator and figure in the Delphi case in the homicides of Abby and Libby." She says, "And you testified at trial how many times? So many times at the Delphi trial." So many times. He says, "At the actual trial, I think I testified twice, but all the hearings leading up to it, I've testified multiple times at all the hearings." That's right, because remember the 3-day hearing that took place in July, August? He testified both or all 3 days of that. There were other hearings prior to that that he had to testify. I'm sure he was at the misconduct one where, um, they had whatchamacallit, Nick McLeland was trying to get them on misconduct or whatever because of some leaked photos, which, as we know now, were not the only leak, and there might be leaked photos that came from the prosecution side potentially. Anyways, so Jerry Holman says, he testified every hearing. I believe I testified to include the second hearing, but at the trial, I believe only twice he testified. I think they called him, he testified, and then they recalled him for something. All right, so the host says, "Only twice? Okay, it seemed like more, but then you also were a witness at the sentencing that where we just attended. So that was the December 20th sentencing where he received 130 years, Richard Allen." She says, which I want to ask you about. "So we have so many questions for you, actually. So thank you for taking this time with me and with Hidden True Crime." There you go. That's the name of the show. "We appreciate it so much, and I want to start by thanking you for the work you did on the case. And you have been with the Indiana State Police since 2001, and so you have a robust military career as well. You joined the Marine Corps right after high school, is that correct?" "That is correct. Yes," he says. "Well, thank you. Thank you for your service. And man, so many questions because, and I know, man, the internet has kind of like the wild, wild west. It's kind of like the wild, wild west when it comes to this case from the very beginning. And really, what really matters the most, though, it is that two little girls' lives were taken. But questions do surround the investigation, and there hasn't been a lot of answers for the public. And we're here because the gag order has been lifted. So the gag order that was in place the whole time since the uh, probable cause affidavit came out, that everything was under a gag order, and um, everything was redacted in that too, the probable cause affidavit. So, and I believe it's even missing a page, which I don't know. Seems suspicious. But anyways, so it was all under a gag. Now, after the sentencing, the gag order has been lifted. Any of the investigators, the lawyers, everyone is now free to speak out openly about the case, or at least as openly as, feasible. Because the defense attorneys, Richard Allen's attorneys, have come flat out and said, "We're planning to appeal. We're going to appeal. We hope we're on this case again." So they have done some press after this, which I also want to go over. So keep an eye out for that. But they've done some press. They've been on podcasts, they've been on local news stations and whatnot talking about this case since Jerry Holman's press tour because they wanted to combat some of the things that Holman was saying, which were just flat out fabrications, which you'll see here. So, yeah, so everybody is now allowed to speak. And so we have questions. Let's start first off, Lieutenant Holman, if that's okay, with how you got involved in this case. Take me back to February 14th, 2017. Holman says, "Okay, yeah. So at the time, I was the District Investigative Commander or DIC for the Lafayette Post. So I oversee all investigations that the state police is involved in, and we quite often assist other counties. So if we hear about something, we'll reach out to the sheriffs or investigators of those counties. And at that time, it was February 14th, the day the girls were found, not the day they went missing. And I was on my way to the Lafayette Post, and I heard on the radio on the news that there was two girls missing in Carroll County. So it was probably 8 in the morning. I reached out to Sheriff Lesenby, that's our guy Tobe Lesenby, who he's no longer the sheriff, by the way. Liggett is. Tony Liggett. All right, so I reached out to Sheriff Lesenby at the time and asked him if they needed any assistance, and he said at that time they didn't. How many times is he going to say at that time? Do we need a counter? um, he said it up here too. Where was it? At the time, reached out to Sheriff Lesenby at the time. It was twice in like the following sentences, or two consecutive sentences. He said it. They had a large number of volunteers looking and searching the area that they were last seen. And I said, okay, well, if you need anything, let us know. And probably a couple hours after that phone call, I received a phone call from Captain Kirkham, who is now retired, but he was the Area 1 captain who was one of my supervisors at the time. There it is at the time again. And he said that they were requesting a helicopter and wanted investigators over there to find out what was going on. So myself and my sergeant, Steve Buckley, headed over there. I got there first and met with Tony Liggett and Kevin Hammond and also spoke with the sheriff, and they said, well, we're just searching. We don't know what happened and asking questions and things like that. So that was my first involvement in the investigation. Hmm? So he gets there. Let's read this over. So myself, my sergeant Steve Buckley headed over there. I got there first and met with Tony Liggett, who's now the sergeant. I think he was like deputy something then, deputy sergeant or deputy sheriff, whatever. That's what I meant. He's now sheriff. Um, so I got there first and met with Tony Liggett and Kevin Hammond, and also spoke with the sheriff. And they said, well, we're just searching. We don't know what happened. So why did he get there with his sergeant then? What did he do once he got there? He didn't explain. He just said that's how I first got involved. He just shows up there with the sergeant. Okay. Okay. And you were involved then. Should we say up until this moment, always involved in the investigation? Yes, I've always been involved in it for the last 7 years and 10 months. We never left the site. It was the bottom of the hill. Once the girls were located, myself and uh, I want to interject here because it's on my mind. By the way, we are a month away from the 8-year anniversary, I believe it is, of when the girls went missing. So this is January 13th as I record this. So next month, February 13th, will be the anniversary of their disappearance, which is unfortunate because they did not get justice. And like, I don't feel good about that. Um, Having an innocent man whose all of his freedoms and everything have been completely his rights have been infringed upon, and the girls still have yet to have justice, and there are perpetrators out there that are walking, in my opinion. All right, so once the girls were located, myself and Sergeant Buckley got there rather early. There were some other officers there. We got the scene secure. Okay, so that's the first thing they did was secure the scene. And other officers were putting up crime scene tape and things like that. So what is securing the scene if it's not putting up crime scene tape? So he didn't even do that. It was other officers. What did he do? He's not specifically answering. And then we had the opportunity to meet with Tony Liggett and Kevin Hammond. And at that time, again, he says, at that time, I said, hey, are you guys going to be the lead in this or do you want us to be? And I can't remember which one, and I refused to ask, but one of them said, you guys should probably be the lead. But the other one said, let's talk to the sheriff. And later, Sheriff Lesenby came and he said, I think you know it's our county will be the lead, but will you promise to give us all the resources you have? And I said, yes, I will. We will not leave you and we'll give you everything we have. So the county, not the state police, right? Yeah, Sheriff Liggett, Sheriff County, Carroll County Sheriff Lesenby says, we'll take it. The county's going to take it. But you guys, the state, give us your resources. And Holman says, and I said, yes, I will. We will not leave you and we'll give you everything we have. The state police is a much larger organization. We have a lot more resources available to include our laboratory and crime scene investigators and things like that, public information officers, more detectives. So I said, yeah, we're not going to leave you. And I meant that, and we didn't. The host says, can I ask you at the crime scene what your first thoughts were when it came to maybe the type of crime this was? Is that fair to ask? I didn't tell you I was going to ask that, but I didn't tell you I was going to ask that. So she went over all the questions with him prior to, by the way, or at least it seems that way. She got approval, something like that, for the questions that she did ask. But he answers it. He says, "Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I've been asked that type of question multiple times, and I think my answer is he thinks his answer. I was very angry with another human being, or very angry that another human being could treat two human beings like that, two young innocent girls. I've been involved in many traumatic events, crashes, homicides, domestic batteries throughout the years, and also a Marine for 8. So I've become a little bit compartmentalized, I believe, on traumatic events. So the actual scene itself doesn't haunt me or bother me. It's just the anger outweighs all the other emotions that I have because I just don't understand how any human being could treat other human beings like that. So I was just angry about that and not knowing why somebody could do that. Is that proper for an investigator to use his anger like that? I don't know. His anger outweighs all other emotions. He continues on saying, the scene itself, I knew it was going to be a very tough investigation because of the location. It's out in the middle of nowhere. There wasn't going to be a lot of witnesses, and it turned out there wasn't a lot of cameras around or a lot of evidence that we could follow up on. So I knew it was going to be a very intensive investigation. It's going to labor intensive investigation. It's going to take a lot of old fashioned detective work. That's kind of what my thoughts were. The host says, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And we're going to get into, honestly, let me say this first. There was something that you said before we started that I want to share, and that is that you said you have nothing to hide. You have nothing to hide. And so, with that, thank you for that. And I think that I want to go through all the different scenarios of possibilities with this crime from Odinism to Keegan to the landowner. But where did your mind go? What type of person did this? Do you think right away ritualistic crime because of sticks? Or did you think that this was like a intimate partner moment? I don't know what to call that. Um, motive? Or where did your law enforcement brain or military brain take you when you were assessing this crime? Jerry Holman says, initially, I think I had a lot of other thoughts. It was a failed SA and maybe a kidnapping attempt. And just because of the way the girls were found, once completely naked, and the other one had clothes off and put some others on it, and on it, the body, that's an interesting phrase, and put some others on it. And so I think that that's where my mind went. I always thought it was a person, one person. I didn't want to put blinders on. We have these people saying that they thought it was multiple people. We have it on record. We have it on video. We have it, reported by journalists. And I use that word loosely because our legacy media does not really cover the news, but or nor are they journalists. But anyways, let's keep going. So I kept an open mind and thought maybe it could be multiple, but as the investigation went on, it was clear to me that one person was capable and did do this. So the odinist, the ritualistic KILling thing, I never believed that. Our crime scene investigators told us early on that the BLOOD on the tree was spatter, that it was not initially painted on there or put on there. You could tell the difference. They could. So they just told you, oh, it's not spatter, or it is, sorry, that it is spatter, that it's not. This isn't ritualistic runes. This is just spatter that looks exactly like the F rune or whatever it's called. It's called something else, but it looks like an F. So, I mean, you and I maybe not because that's our specialty, but that they couldn't tell the difference. But our crime scene investigators at the time, Jason Page, had plenty of training in spatter, and I would say that he's a spatter expert. So he was saying that that wasn't a symbol. But again, we didn't rule it out. So you didn't rule it out, but yet you're saying it's unequivocally not a ritualistic whatever, but you're not ruling it out. So do you see how they talk out of both sides of his mouth? Him and Doug Carter, too, the superintendent. He talks like Holman a lot. So he was saying that it wasn't a symbol, but again, we didn't rule it out. The sticks to me look like just sticks randomly put on there with no purpose. Well, that's because you don't understand. But to someone who put them there, they understood it. That's why you get the experts in Odinism and stuff, ritualistic crimes and whatnot. And that's what our crime scene investigators were telling us as well. So I didn't believe it was ritualistic or realistic, but again, we weren't going to leave any stones unturned. So we did a thorough investigation, did research on that and behavior analysis units, professors, people that specialize in those types of investigations. Yeah, the professor agreed that it was likely some kind of ritualistic sacrifice. And they were telling us that it's just not ritualistic or realistic, sorry. Man, my brain, shut up, Heather. Stop like putting words where they're not supposed to be. All right. And they were telling us that it's just not realistic that it would be because if it was, there'd be no doubt. It would be so obvious that it was ritualistic in nature, but anybody could come and say, "Hey, I think it's this. Can I look into it?" Yeah, go ahead and look. Let us know and let us know what you say. But no one could ever prove that it was some sort of ritualistic KILling. You have multiple people. You have an FBI task force. You have professors. You have these officers who wrote an actual Odin report on how this was tied to Odinism. Yet we're going to say here that it wasn't. There's no possibility of it being ritualistic in nature. Sure, Jan. Sure. Now, because Brad Holder and Patrick Westphal were involved in Norse paganism religion, some people jumped to a conclusion that that's automatically what they do. Well, that's just not true, and I had no clue about those religions back then, but doing research and being updated on that it's a religion, it's not a cult, it's not a gang, and they don't believe in human sacrifices. So we pretty much ruled it out, but keep an open mind, and that's my initial thought on that. And there are plenty of uh, people who are experts in this who would tell you differently that Odinism is more of a cult or a gang or a white supremacist type of group, whatever you want to call it, gang group. It's not a religion. I mean, they may use religion as, the umbrella of, this is a good thing, this is what we're doing it for, but really they have nefarious plots to hurt others. Anyways. All right, so the host says, Lieutenant Holman, something that you've said before, and you actually said in trial, is that you left no stone unturned in this investigation, but if there was probable cause, you move forward. So are you saying that you absolutely did investigate this sort of ritualistic KI double Lling scenario, and there wasn't probable cause, or how would you explain that? He says, yeah, I think that's a pretty good explanation. We had tips on numerous different people not related to ritualistic sacrifice, and some that people thought were involved, like I said, in that religion, and basically just didn't know what the religion was about. But yeah, we looked into those people, multiple interviews with multiple different people. And the only person, yeah, those multiple interviews that all got erased, by the way. And the only person that we established probable cause to make an arrest on was Richard Allen. The rest we didn't. And we're not going to falsely arrest somebody or falsely accuse somebody without establishing probable cause. That's just not what we're going to do. There's another lie, but okay. So we looked into, like you started to say earlier, the property owner, multiple people, and we served multiple search warrants on people and people's property. Ron Logan, we've talked about him on my channel. He's the property owner whose land the girls' bodies were found on. There was an arrest, or not a search warrant for his home. He's saying the ISP served it. I thought it was more so the feds, but anyways, whoever served it, it makes you wonder, did they find anything related? I don't know. It makes me wonder what's going on because we know that the Brad Holder, Patrick Westfall, Elvis Fields, all their interviews got erased. Ron Logan, did his interview get erased? I'm not sure about him or Keegan Klein or all the others, but it just seems really suspicious. Anyways, he goes on and says, and we served multiple search warrants on people and people's property. And again, nothing came back to establish probable cause on those people. So again, we're not going to have tunnel vision, but we're also not going to falsely arrest someone. I think he is protesting too much because he said it about 4 times that he's not going to do that. The host says, okay. So in other words, I think I just want to kind of process that with our listeners too, that there was a base, there was an idea, there was an investigation into could this be ritualistic? And the bottom line is you went through the evidence, you assessed, you investigated. Was there any hiding at this time of information or evidence when it comes to this? I'll bring up all the theories online. I'm bringing up all the theories online. Holman says, yeah, no, none whatsoever. We looked into them. There was no evidence indicating that these people that practice the religion were involved or anything and the evidence at the scene just wasn't strong enough to indicate that this was a ritualistic sacrifice. Again, that's not what the Purdue professor said, and that's not what the task force of the FBI said. 3 separate officers who were investigating the Odinist theory all agreed that it was this type of crime. And Jerry Holman, who is not an expert in Odinism, he just admitted it here. He claims it's not. He made the decision it's not, so therefore it's not. Okay. The host says, I was actually going to try to go in order here, but since we're on sort of what you're talking about, what about the idea of another person confessing or the possibility of someone else saying, my DNA is at the crime scene? I think you know who I'm talking about. Obviously, that's Elvis Fields, who said if his spit was on one of the girls and he could explain it, would he still get in trouble? I believe were his exact words to Officer Murphy, one of the Odinist report authors. Jerry Holman says, yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely. Somebody's saying that if my spit's on it at the crime scene, but I can explain that away, doesn't mean that that's a clue that we need to go back and talk to that person again. And that person was interviewed multiple times by multiple different people. Again, where are those interviews, though? If they're multiple times, multiple different people, and all those interviews got recorded over it, that's a little suspicious, don't you think? And his explanation was he wanted to know if I spit on the ground and someone scoops that spit up and takes it to a crime scene, would you be able to tell? Let me ask that question one more time. This is the explanation given to us from lead detective Lieutenant Holman saying this was Elvis Field's explanation that if he spit on the ground, someone scooped up his spit and took it to the crime scene, which I can't imagine anyone doing, would they be able to tell that that was transferred spit as opposed to he actually spit on one of the girls? Are you kidding me? Moving on. This was his explanation, and that person had never been to Delphi. He could never put that person into Delphi. You know, I but his phone was at home the entire day that day when all history of Elvis Fields and his phone was that it was attached to him at the hip. He never left his phone. So the fact that he just left his phone on all that day, no interaction, and he likely wasn't at home with it then. Anyways, so you know, I think again, probable cause goes a long way. No, it doesn't. It's a lot. It's y- thin, thin. Probable. There isn't a whole lot to take probable cause. Like if an officer pulls you over and they look in the window and they see like a bunch of blanket in the back seat, that's probable cause to think that you might be hiding something, and for them to search. It's really not that difficult, or it's not that high of a bar for probable cause for all these so-called third-party suspects who I believe should have been the suspects to begin with to have gotten search warrants or arrest warrants or whatever. But here's Jerry Holman lying his ass off again, saying probable cause goes a long way. And you can't just say because this person, knows this person, that knows this person conspired to commit a crime. You can't put them together. They don't know each other. Just because one knows somebody kind of, sort of, and that person knows another person, there's no proof of evidence indicating that they were in some sort of club or organization or cult or gang to do that. But we know that all of them, Elvis Fields, what's his name, Abrams, uh, Westfield or Westfall, Patrick Westfall, all of them know each other. They're connected by this Odinist cult that they're in. They all have like a sect or, different um different gangs, if you, for lack of a better word. Like they're the Delphi Vinlanders, and then there's the Rushville Vinlanders or whatever. And the people from Rushville were trying to get into um the Delphi Vinlanders. So yes, they do know each other. That is a connection. That's a nexus, if you want to use the word that Judge Gull uses. That's a nexus to those third party suspects. Anyways, moving on. Let's, where did I leave off? So just because one knows somebody, da 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 da, there's no proof of evidence indicating that they were in some sort of club or organization. So we investigated that very thoroughly. Todd Click, Kevin Murphy, and before Greg Frenzy was brutally uh, taken, his life was taken, as we know, and now we know that the person who did it is a Vinlander. He's an Odinist. Coming from That's confirmation coming from the investigator on the defense team that the person who took Greg Frenzy's life actually was an Odinist or had ties to Odinism. He was a corrections officer, probably one of the ones that would have been walking around with the Odin patch on if he had the opportunity. So just, yeah, it's all connections. This is all an excess that he's giving us, even though he's saying blah blah blah. This isn't a connection, but it actually, him bringing it up and tying it all together just proves the point that it is. Anyway, so all of these people were looking into it, and others and other investigators, me included, we were looking into it that very thoroughly. And yeah, the bottom line is there was no connection, no direct criminal nexus in that group of people. Bullshit, in my opinion, and the defense came out and falsely accused. The defense didn't just come out and accuse. They were reading or citing the Odin report, which was created by the FBI task force, which ISP kicked off of the case at some point in time. Probably once they realized that they were not going to give up this Odinist thing, they were like, you know what? You guys can go. Because we don't want that coming out from our town. We don't want anybody associating our town with all of this child sacrifice stuff. Anyways, I mean, we looked into it and covered those people very thoroughly. The host says, yeah, and we mentioned the property owner, Ron Logan. I'll just say his name. Still to this day, people say, well, I think it's him. I think it's him. People searched his house, and you're saying, as far as probable cause goes, you could not tie him to this crime. Is that correct? Holman says that is correct. Several search warrants on him and his property, and there's no direct nexus to him being involved either. Well, he loses all credibility because in the paragraph above, he just talked about how there was no nexus between all those Vinlanders who are obviously in the same group. But okay. Moving on. Talking about Ron Logan, Holman says he had an alibi. It was tight, but he was, at certain places that we were able to prove during that time that would have made it very, very difficult for him to be at the crime scene during the crimes. So we looked into it again, searched his house, and found no evidence connecting him to the crime scenes or the crimes. I believe his phone was in the area, so I don't know what he's talking about the him not being in the area at the time, that he couldn't do it, some alibi. I don't know. All right, so the host says, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure this feels what we call rinse and repeat for a lot of law enforcement as you've investigated this, but for those of us in the true crime community and those of us covering this case, it's sort of this continuous conversation. And we have been waiting, for the gag order to be lifted to ask these questions once again. So thank you for indulging these questions that might feel like repeat to you. I appreciate it. So how important was then the evidence of Bridge Guy? And by that, I'm saying how important was the evidence that Libby herself, the victim, brought to this investigation? Holman says, well, very important, very, very important. And like Prosecutor McLeland said, and I've said it before, the girls are the true heroes in this case. This is their narrative. This is totally a narrative that they just wanted to spin. Because the whole hero thing, in my opinion, is bogus. Because the video that they took of this bridge guy's like barely in view. and he's quite some distance away. So he was not the focus of that video. So I don't know why they always keep coming back to, well, the girls were heroes and they hid the phone. No, no, I don't think they hid the phone either because the bodies were moved. There were drag marks. So, or not, there were not drag marks, but it appeared that the bodies had been moved, meaning that there were multiple people and two people at least to carry the girls' bodies to where they were found. Anyways, all right. So very, very important. And like Prosecutor McLeland said, and I've said it before, the girls are the true heroes in this case. I hate people saying, oh, you're a hero. No, I didn't do anything special. I followed up on the evidence and the facts. Who did something special was Liberty and Abby. And to be able to be a 14-year-old girl and have the awareness to turn your phone on and videotape. Girls, 14-year-old girls, I would imagine all over the world have video recording all the time because they're always on their phones and making videos and things. It doesn't mean that she purposely did it at this time to spot Bridge Guy, but obviously they were in fear of their lives and she videotaped that. There was no obvious about it because the girls weren't even talking like they were scared. And from day one, after we got that video, a lot of us, me included, believed that that was the person that took the girls' lives. And we knew up until we found the tip and the information on Richard Allen, we knew that if we found Bridge Guy and we knew we have not identified him, that we would be able to solve this crime. Okay, okay. And so at what point, can I ask you, did you know that Richard Allen was Bridge Guy or that guy? Holman says, I mean, I think once we found Kathy Shanks found the misfiled tip, or however you want to phrase that, misfiled tip, or however you want, we still don't know to this day what the tip was that she found, other than the only thing that they tell us was the file just happened to be out there. She saw it and she looked at it, and this tip got him arrested. But what was the tip within the file? We don't know. We started doing a lot of intelligence gathering and looking into Richard Allen like we would anybody else that we thought was out there on the bridge, either as a witness or as a suspect. And we started putting circumstantial evidence together, leading us to believe that he was Bridge Guy. So it's all circumstantial. Got it. And then I think when I first believed it was when Steve Mullen and Tony Liggett interviewed him, and he basically described himself as Bridge Guy and being out there on the bridge. And at that point, I knew that he was Bridge Guy, and I knew that we were able to have eyewitnesses who said that they saw Bridge Guy. But nobody said that they saw Bridge Guy or that they identified Richard Allen as Bridge Guy at trial. And, just put all of those pieces of the puzzle together, and there was no doubt that he was out there and that he was the one on the video telling the girls, kidnapping them, telling them to go down the hill. And I think at this time, I believe that, but again, we were building the case and we weren't going to falsely arrest someone. Freudian slip. Uh, he was going to arrest someone falsely. So we were putting together and establishing probable cause, and when he left and stopped cooperating and wouldn't allow us to look at his phone or get his DNA, we were able to apply and obtain a search warrant for his residence. So because he didn't want to cooperate with you guys, because you guys were barking up the wrong tree, you go and get a search warrant for his house because he didn't want to be interrogated by you anymore on a bogus tip that we can't even know about. I really think that they were just looking for a scapegoat. He was the scapegoat. Kathy Shank is the one that said, let's put it all on Richard Allen. He said he was there that day. That's what I think happened. Because election season. and whatnot. Where'd we go? All right, so, and I think at this time, I believe, but again, we were building the case and we weren't going to falsely arrest someone, so we were putting together and establishing probable cause. And when he left and stopped paying attention, blah, 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 that's when they got the search warrant. And I think out there, my communication with him was odd. So when he got to Richard Allen's house and they did the search warrant, the communication was odd. His behavior was odd. And him and I had minimal discussion, but I told him, "Hey, we're not here to tear your house up or break any locks, but if we need your cooperation, will you assist us so we don't have to do that?" And he made multiple comments of, "Doesn't matter, it's over." He made that comment multiple times out there when we served that search warrant, and I just thought that was odd, another odd. And just putting all of that together and then finding the items that we found and sending them to the lab. What did they find? And sending them to the lab and getting the lab results that indicated that the round that we found on February 14th between Abby and Libby, closest to Libby, matched his gun. That's the only tangible evidence that they have that they say belong or somehow is tied to Richard Allen. But as we know, ballistics is not reliable. It should be refuted greatly at trial, but unfortunately, judges don't understand that. Anyways, and he couldn't explain that. So putting all of that together and the video of his car and all the circumstantial evidence with the witness statements, I knew we had the right guy. The host says that was one of the big things you testified on were the conversations you had with him while his house was being searched. That was a moment. You just mentioned it. So he stated to you, and I want to understand this, he stated to you, it doesn't matter anyway, or can you take me back to to what he was saying to you? Because it was a really important part, in my opinion, of your testimony on the stand of conversations you had with him during the search of his house. Holman says, sure. So, as a supervisor, I did a walkthrough with the crime scene investigator, and they take pictures before they start the search. That way, if we are accused of, destroying a property, on we'll have that on pictures of it before we started and after. People don't speak in grammatical sentences. Sometimes it's really hard to read testimony. We also go back and take pictures after and during the search. So I did a walkthrough and I told Richard Allen I was going to do a walkthrough and why, and that if we did destroy anything, that wasn't going to be on purpose and that there's a process. We have a tort claim that he can fill out if we do destroy any of his property. And he made the comment, and I'd have to look at my report to see exactly what he said, but he said it doesn't matter, it's over anyway. And I didn't dig into it at the time. I just noted it and put it in my report. But he made that statement several times. And at some point, he sat in the car with me when his wife needed to use the restroom. So she went to her place of employment and he asked if he could sit in the car with me. And he asked me, "Did you guys detain or did you arrest my wife?" And I said, "No, why?" And he said, "Well, she was gone for a long bit." And I said, "Well, I could take you out to where she works if you want me to go find her." And he said, "No." He said it again, "No, it doesn't matter. It's over anyways." And he said it a few times. And then in my interview, I asked him what he meant by it. He just said, "Well, you've talked to these people and they all think I'm guilty and my life's over anyway, and that's just weird to me that an innocent," so now he went from odd to weird. "That's just weird to me that an innocent person would say that. Why would it be weird that an innocent person doesn't want their neighbors and friends and family members to be, wondering, is that person guilty? This person I've known my whole life for however many years. How well do I know them? Are they capable of this?" So, you damage someone's reputation when you accuse them of a crime. Uh, you don't get that back. Like, you don't get your reputation back after you're exonerated. Most of the time, people still are like, "Nah, she's guilty," or "He's so guilty," blah blah blah. Like, people don't want to admit that. Oh, maybe the courts get it wrong sometimes. The law enforcement gets it wrong sometimes. Um, He says, as we searched many people's houses and they never said it's over, they said, go ahead, search it. And I didn't do it. You're not going to find anything. So it was just odd to me that he would say that multiple times. Well, maybe Richard Allen keeps his thoughts more to himself and he was feeling a little sorry for himself at the time. Like, forget it, man, it's over. Like, my reputation's already destroyed. Anyways, the host of the show says, of course, the other really interesting part of your testimony in court, and maybe this is actually why in my brain I envision you testifying more than even twice, as you said, is because we watched multiple times the interrogation that you did of Richard Allen, two separate interrogations, and one in which led to the arrest of Richard Allen. And nobody else, the public, has not seen those. It was interesting. Yeah, when are those going to be released? Release the interrogation videos, release all of it. We want to see it. So it was interesting. I think I might have been I might have been one that after I watched it the first time in court, I might have joked and maybe said, you kind of maybe thought you were on an episode of CSI or something. Bitch, this ain't a joke. This is this man's life. Why is it a joke to you that Richard Allen is getting interrogated by law enforcement when he did nothing wrong? If anything, we should be outraged, not joking about it. But okay. She goes on to say, you were really into it and passionate, and the language that was used was really intense. A lot of F bombs, a lot of all this. But can you take me back there? Because it was also edited. We didn't see the whole thing. We saw the majority of it, but all of a sudden went from a bit of a calmness to you just sort of really yelling at him and, telling him he did it. Can you take us through that interrogation? I hope that the public is able to see it one day, but what were your tactics and what were you feeling and thinking during this investigation? I want to back up for a moment and address what she just said here. There was a moment in the video where it's like they're just talking calmly, and then it like skips to this moment of time where Holeman is yelling at Richard Allen. So what did he say in that time frame in between? There's video missing. This video was edited, as the host says. So what happened there? He says, well, again, it wasn't meant to be an interrogation. We actually had him set up a time for him to come in and we planned on giving him his car back. If law enforcement is calling you and saying we want to give you something back, don't go there alone without an attorney. Or if they want to get you in a back room, don't go in the back. All right, so he says we actually had him set up for a time, but we wanted to talk about some of the results of the tests that we had, one being the tool marks on the round that was found matched his gun. And then also we were still testing other items and we wanted to know if he had lent any other items out or anything like that. So, did you lend your gun to anybody? Did you lend this to anybody? Could anybody have borrowed it without your knowledge? Blah 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 blah. So what was weird to me, again another weird, what was weird to me is we actually scheduled that interview a few days before and he canceled. And then when I went out to the lobby to get him, he was with his wife, and just the way he was dressed to me was odd. Another odd. He was wearing his sweatpants and a t-shirt, I believe. oh no, arrest him because obviously you can't wear a sweatpants and a t-shirt into a police station. Oh my word. Like seriously. What he was wearing was odd to you? He was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. Maybe he was not working at the time. He had a day off and that he was just running errands and lounging and whatever and he didn't care what he looked like because he didn't think he was going to be interrogated by you. And he took off his coat and he emptied his pockets. I think he may have like a lighter and some cigarettes or something, maybe a wallet. I can't remember exactly, but he emptied his pockets and gave those items to his wife, which most people don't do that. Well, he's in sweatpants, so maybe he didn't want to have those things falling out of his pants when he sat down. But he emptied his pockets and gave those items to his wife, which most people don't do. I have had people that I've interviewed in the past and said, hey, I'm going to turn this report over to the prosecutor. And if he decides to issue a warrant, can I call you and you meet me and turn yourself in? And they say, yeah, sure. And when I would call them, that's how they would show up because I think it's common knowledge that you can't bring personal items into the jail, and more than likely they're going to throw them away or lose them. So to me, as soon as I engaged with him in the lobby, it was he thought I was going to arrest him. You don't know what he was thinking. And at that time, our intentions was just to try to clear up some things and get some explanations for some of the test results that we had and collect his DNA and do some other things. But our intentions weren't to arrest him that day. We were trying to give him the opportunity to explain what was going on. So, again, that was odd. He continues on. And then during the interview, the majority of the interview, we were both calm. He started cussing at me. I normally treat people as they treat me. So if you're not cursing, I'm not going to curse. But if you start cursing, then I'm going to speak your language. And he had dropped the F bomb a couple of times and I did not. Probably getting frustrated with you because you keep accusing him of doing something he didn't do. I was giving him the benefit of the doubt that I was accusing him of taking the lives of two people. But he just, no, you're not giving him the benefit of the doubt. But he made some odd comments and things like that to me. I made the comment that he said he cared what people thought of him, and I said, yeah, I understand that. And, your wife doesn't think you're a bad person. I don't think you're a bad person. And he made the comment, well, what kind of good person takes the lives of two girls? You can take that as what kind of, how can I be good if I took the lives of two girls? But that's not exactly what he said. He said, what kind of person or what kind of good person takes the lives of two girls? So he's not taking blame. He's not putting the blame on himself. He's asking, why would you or my wife think that I'm a good person if you're accusing me of this crime? You think I did this crime. Why would you think I'm a good person? It just doesn't make sense. Uh, but again, Jerry Holman says that was odd to me. Well, you know what? I think Jerry Holman's odd. That's what I think. I allowed him a break, actually a smoke break and a bathroom break, and gave him a couple of waters, maybe one or two, and everything that we normally do in an extended interview. And I also asked him if he would like to talk to his wife because she was telling us some things that wasn't adding up. And he said, yeah. So I allowed him to talk to his wife. It was very odd. Again, odd when she came in my opinion. I observed it. She was very standoffish. She didn't act like she wanted to be there. She was upset. Well, what do you think? Do you think she wants to be there if you, the police, are trying to accuse her husband of this crime that he didn't do? I wouldn't want to be there either. She was very upset. She asked him why you didn't tell me you were on the bridge that day, and they had a conversation about some things. He tried to hug her, and she was very standoffish with him. Wait, I thought that he did tell her that he went there and was on the bridge that day because Um, my mind is blanking. But I thought he did tell her. So I don't know why she'd be walking in saying, "Why didn't you tell me that?" Because she's the that's why. Because she's the one that told him to call the police and to let them know that he was there that day at the trails. But here Holman is saying that he didn't tell her. I think that that's another one of Holman's lies. And they had a conversation about some things. He tried to hug her, and she was very standoffish with him. So that was odd behavior. Yet again, the word odd. Whoops. Ah, the word odd. How many times does he say odd in this thing? I should go back and count it. Actually, I'll do a find, and I don't have to count it. Odd. 63 references to the word odd in his interview. So Jerry Holman arrested Richard Allen because he's odd to him, in his opinion. That is so subjective, and yet here that's the reason basically why Richard Allen is sitting in prison. That and a frame job, but um so that was odd behavior for the 49th time. He's saying it's odd. And then, yeah, some things are edited out because they may be too prejudicial for the jury to hear. And the things that were edited out was I offered him a polygraph. And you can't say that because if someone denies or refuses to take a polygraph, that's too prejudicial to present to the jury. And I understand that. And that's why those things were edited out. That's the only thing that was edited out. The host says, so he denied, right? He didn't want the polygraph. Jerry Holman says, yeah, he refused multiple times. And while his wife was in there, I asked her, I said, if you're innocent, would you take a polygraph? And she said, yes. And I said, well, I've offered Richard to take the polygraph multiple times and he refuses to do it. And he got angry with me then and started cussing. And I started cussing and said, if you are innocent, take the effing polygraph and things like that. And then he asked me to let his wife go. And I said, sure, you can go. And I said, tell him to do the right thing. So he's trying to use like his wife to coerce some kind of confession out of him. And then when I really got angry is when he said that you're going to pay for this. And I said, no, it's not me, Richard Allen. This is on you. I'm not going to pay for this. You're going to pay for it. And I only raised my voice and cursed for maybe a total of 30, maybe 30, 40 seconds. The rest of the time I was calm, just like this, but I did use some deceptive tactics that we're trained to use. So he uses highlighted over there. He uses the read technique, which I have talked about before on my channel. I did a more in-depth video on the read technique and what it is and why it elicits confessions so well. Um, it gets guilty people to confess, but it also gets innocent people to confess to crimes that they were never even in the vicinity of. So, yeah, it's not a good technique, but a lot of uh, police stations today, police departments still use it. They lie, and there you have it. So here he says, some people call them lies. Yes, they are lies. I call them deceptive tactics. Well, tomato, tomato, buddy. It's the same thing. Interview tactics where I over embellish some facts. Like we have eyewitnesses that saw you out there. That's not over embellishing, that's blatantly lying. Well, they did. They saw Bridge Guy, they identified Bridge Guy, and we were able to identify Bridge Guy as being Richard Allen. No one has done that, by the way. And that was never, ever, no one has been able to identify Bridge Guy as Richard Allen. No one at trial, they didn't even connect the two. All they said was, if Richard Allen is Bridge Guy, then and Bridge Guy's the killer, then Richard Allen's the killer. It's like A equals B equals C equals upside down. I don't know. But yeah, so they never concluded that Bridge Guy was Richard Allen, especially when we know that descriptions of Bridge Guy was that he was more like 5'10", 5'9", and Richard Allen is about 5'5", 5'6". So there's a height discrepancy too in the description of Bridge Guy and visual discrepancies as well. Moving on. He says, we had the evidence of his car. We had multiple police officers saying that's him on the video and that's his voice. And I over embellished some of those facts and I said it was experts and things like that. But it's just techniques that we use that people would use that when you're trying to get their kids to tell the truth, if they take a cookie out of the cookie jar. I mean, it's simple tactics that we use to try to elicit a response. He just compared criminals to being children that you can lie to about sticking their hands in the cookie jar. If you stick your hand in the cookie jar before dinner time, it'll bite your hand off. Like that's something you tell a kid. But he's comparing the way that he interviews witnesses to something along those lines, something that ridiculous. He says, I mean, it's simple tactics that we use to try to elicit a response, not necessarily confession, but just a response that we can build on. And at the end of it, we were both calm. I drove him to the Carroll County Sheriff's Department. We had no interaction at all. Definitely no heated interactions, and that was pretty much it. So it says, thank you for explaining all that. The interrogation was the talk of those that were sitting in the gallery in court. And I want to say, while I thought, oh my gosh, that was really intense, now that I understand some of the edits, it makes a little bit more sense to me. But although I was one of them, I was one that was like, man, they definitely didn't edit you yelling at him. I I want you to know that someone else in court was sitting there saying, "No, I thought it was great. Thought he did such a great job." So we were all discussing sharing what we thought about this interrogation. So basically everyone's like sitting there saying, "This was such a great interrogation." Have you guys do you these people are so unaware of what's going on. This host included. People that can just sit there and like kiss his butt like he walks on water, like he's the next Messiah. You did such a great interrogation. And you don't question their methods. They're, trying to torture him, yelling at him in his face and why there was missing footage of in there. Like this, okay. So frustrating that they just sit there and like kiss the law enforcement's butt. I want you to know that someone in the court was saying that, blah, blah, blah. But I want to point out one thing I noticed, and you brought up too, was when his wife came in, when Kathy Allen came in. I actually thought that was really interesting. My take on that was, and you were part of this, you guys were, I guess, as you point out, watching. I felt he was really manipulative to his wife in that room where he was. I think Jerry Holman was manipulative to his wife, and I wouldn't have done this. You know what? You know that I'm not capable of this. And she wasn't hugging him. You're right. She was standoffish and she was sort of like almost, she wasn't sold. And he was like, I wouldn't do this. You know me, Kathy. You know me. And then you hear, yeah. And she stated was one, that she didn't even know he was at the bridge that day during the sentencing, which just happened 6 days ago, actually. That was, well, not now, this was prior, and when they recorded this. That was when the gag order was lifted and why we're able to talk right now. You were called to the stand 6 days ago, and you mentioned that he was manipulative to his wife and family. And you even mentioned specifically religion. That was a moment for him because, as I'm explaining to you, I saw some manipulation of him that wasn't really addressed, but it's just something I noticed in this interrogation. What did you mean when you shared 6 pages ago, or 6 days ago, sorry, at his sentencing, that you felt he manipulated his family and those around him? I I don't even know what to say. I mean, what is Richard Allen supposed to do if his wife is sitting there questioning whether he did this or not, even though he's known her for however many years they've been together, and he's trying to get her to realize, like, you know me, I wouldn't do this. Like, that's not manipulative. That's exactly what I would expect to hear from someone who was innocent, by the way. So, whatever on that point. But so she asks, "What did you mean that he was manipulative?" Jerry Holman says, "I think that would have been after, the arrest was made, his phone conversations and his conversations with corrections officers. I believe I stated that I felt he used religion to manipulate his mother, wife, and corrections officers to get what he wanted." What did he get? What did he get? You think he's faking some new interest in religion, or he's faking his severe psychosis, which was confirmed that he had? I mean, what do you expect him how do you expect him to be? And maybe not just religion, but I think he manipulated them by behavior or his actions that he was doing at the correction facility to get what he wanted. He broke his iPad. I don't I'm not so sure he actually broke it. He might not have been the one that broke it, but even if he did, he might have been in a psychosis and didn't know what he was doing. He wanted another one. He wanted, he didn't like his living conditions. You guys had him in solitary confinement for 15 months. He wanted to be moved. He wanted in-person visits with his wife. Yeah, you guys kept him from his visits. You kept him from seeing his lawyers. And when his lawyers did come, he had to be video recorded. And I think he was being manipulative, saying those things and at some point, using religion and his Bible to convince people that, he found God. Okay. How's he getting things from that, though? And I hope he did. I hope he did. I hope he confesses to all the sins, and I hope he's forgiven for those sins. And I just have a hard time believing that. And I think that he is definitely manipulative and persuasive and selfish. Well, who the heck are you to determine if someone else's religion is true to them or not? Who the hell are you to decide that, Jerry Holman? And that's kind of what I meant by those comments. That he gets to choose who believes in God and whose faith is true or not, according to Jerry Holman. The host says, "Okay, thank you for explaining that. Thank you. Yeah, that was. Was there any reaction of Kathy after the arrest? By the way, that's something, of course, we didn't see. I saw her reaction in that room, sort of standoffish to her husband, but does she have any reaction during the arrest or anything you remember?" Holman says, "Well, I wasn't with her, but what I was told was she was upset and maybe even began to hyperventilate a little bit." Yeah, I would too. She was probably having a panic attack. And they did talk to her several minutes, if not hours, after I took Mr. Allen to Carroll County. So, but yeah, I think probably shocked. I mean, I believe that when this happens, initial shock probably is something that occurs. I bet Kathy would be like, "Keep my name out of your mouth. Don't talk about me. Don't talk about how I felt. It's none of your goddamn business." Especially since he wasn't even there. So, all right. So the host says, For the give a little break there, just so everyone knows, we were getting some feedback echo on my end, so I put my earphones on and we will continue. We were talking about a reaction of Kathy Allen when Richard Allen was arrested that we didn't know about. And thank you for sharing that. I want to also reiterate that she too is a victim in this, and I don't want to blame her in any way. I was actually heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking for me to see her in court every day sitting there. One thing about the interrogation, too, the defense brought up after, as you say, the interview that turned into an interrogation on accident or the accidental interrogation the day he was arrested. They brought up that his Miranda rights had not been recorded. That's a biggie, but they just ignore that too. That they had been given to him, but they didn't make the recording. There was a lot of talk about recordings being missing or interviews being missing, which I think, let's just be honest, led to a lot of theories about you and law enforcement and cover ups. Can you talk about this and what happened with missing recordings? Jerry Holman says, yeah, technology is great when it works. I mean, I think you were at the trial. You even saw we had this brand new smart TV that Prosecutor McLeland was ready to throw out the third floor window, second floor, whichever floor we were on. And the host says that's true. But that's not talking about the interviews that are missing or any kind of recordings missing, notes that are missing from certain psychiatrists that were out talking to every Delphi forum that was out there. So that he's not, he completely didn't address it. He's like, yeah, well, technology's great when it works. You remember the TV in the courtroom? That didn't work, blah, blah, blah. So he's not addressing the fact that these interviews were not recorded. We would practice that thing the day before. We were playing videos and even a break to make sure it would work. And then when the jury would come back, we'd hit play and nothing would happen. So technology is great when it works. I can tell you that one of the errors or technical difficulties that we had were in nothing. None of the errors that we had were intentional, is what he's saying. But I think that's of another blatant lie. To speak on mine, we had multiple in this case, and we had multiple technical difficulties in all of our investigations. But in this one, I thought we checked the recording system before Richard Allen showed up. It was working fine. We started it during the interview, and our plan was they were going to email me. So I have my laptop in the interview room with me if they had any questions or they needed me. And I didn't see the email, but they emailed me and said, hey, the recording's not working. They came and got me. I stepped out of the room and I said, well, it looks like it's working now. And they said, well, we don't know. Go back in there. I went back in and it started interviewing. So the problem with this story that he just said is that the interview doesn't pick up with him walking, when the video breaks off or cuts out, it doesn't pick up with him walking into the room as he says it's working now in this sentence here. And then he goes back into the room. But no, that's not what happened. He says there was a delay. It's a long delay. We tried to fix it the other day because of safety reasons. It's probably a 20, 30-second delay. So you'll say something, you don't hear it on the recording, the monitor until 20 seconds, 30 seconds later. So I went back in and started the interview. But yeah, before I did not officially read him his Miranda rights because he was not in custody, I basically told him that he was free to go. We were here to discuss the items that we took and some of the items that we were going to return and some of the test results. And I asked him, do you remember being interviewed a couple of days ago by Investigator Mullen and Detective Liggett? And he said, yes. I said, so you're aware of your Miranda warnings? And he said, yeah. That's not reading him his rights, though. That's not the same. He said, yeah. And I said, That door's not locked. You're free to go at any time. You're free to stop answering questions. So I didn't officially read him Miranda warnings, but I made sure that he was aware. And yeah, unfortunately, that was not caught on the recording system. It was not intentionally done. I'm not even intelligent enough to know how to delete interviews like that. Okay, but I'm sure there's people on your team that do know. I wouldn't even know where to start. So that was that case. There was another one that wasn't brought up where I interviewed a couple of people in the Department of Corrections, some prisoners, and heard some comments. I went there, same recording device. It's called iRecord. So the prison's very sketchy about even police officers bringing in any additional items. They don't want you to bring your cell phone or digital recorder. So I asked them, "Can I bring my digital recorder?" And they said no. And we got a recording device. So I interviewed 3 or 4 people at the Department of Corrections. So the DOC has their own recording device, is what they're saying. And after the interviews were over, they were gonna download it on a thumb drive for me, and it didn't work. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So I called the 2 or 3 of the prisoners. We were still out there in the waiting area. So I called them back and got a digital recording and re-interviewed them. So it happened again. And at that time, the other prisoner went back and they were having a hard time locating him. He was actually with some services and he wasn't where in his room or whatever they held him. And they actually put the prison on lockdown. I said, "I'll come back." And they said, "What is he talking about?" I said, "I'll come back." And they said, "No, you can't leave. We're on lockdown until we find him." And they weren't concerned about it. They knew he was probably at an appointment. They just took them a while, but they located him. But yeah, we had technical difficulties even up there. What does it have to do with this case? This is bizarre. That was like a whole bizarre rambling. And then the ones that were referred to in court about the Delphi City, I can tell you without a doubt that Steve Mullen did not intentionally erase or lose any audio videotape statements. Well, Steve Mullen is probably the one who did it. Or if it wasn't Steve Mullen, he's saying it in that word, in that phraseology, saying Steve Mullen did not intentionally do that because it was somebody else who intentionally did it. Um, but whatever, I think it's probably Steve Mullen. So what happened was the system they have, it's either a key or switch outside the recording interview room, and you turn that on, and usually in most of them, a green light comes on, and you know that somebody's in there recording, and then you're done. You turn it off, and there's a red light when whoever went in there accidentally left the switch on. So it just rewrote over multiple interviews early on. How does that doesn't even make sense. So it starts recording when the switch is on. Wouldn't it just keep recording like continuously all day then, even when the room's empty? If that's what happened, that's he's wrong. More blatant lies by Jerry Holman. And we weren't aware of that until weeks or months into the investigation. Once we found out that happened, we owned it. And we attempted to go back and locate the people that were interviewed. And if the investigator or detective did not memorialize that in the written report, then we would try to locate the people and re interview them and make sure that we had that on an audio videotape statement or memorialized in the report. And then later on, in the other place that we had at the command center, the old RC building, we had made several interviews there, and at some point the audio quit working. Do you see how long this answer is? Like he just keeps rambling and rambling. So to me, this is just meaning that none of this is true. There's very little truth in anything he's saying here. And then later on in the other place we had at the command center, the old RMC building, we had several interviews there. And at some point the audio quit working. We didn't know until a few days or a few weeks or when people started listening to them and trying to put things together. And as long as the officer memorialized what he was said in the report, some people maybe felt comfortable going back and re-interviewing, and some of them were comfortable with memorialized information in the report. So we were able to correct most of those mistakes with the audio, video, and none of it pertained towards Richard Allen. No, but it's all third party suspects that were immediately interviewed early on in the investigation, which have a lot of credibility and a nexus, a criminal nexus, like he said. There was no criminal nexus. So we were able to correct most of the mistakes. That's not true, but okay. But the early on mistakes, call them mistakes. I call them technical difficulties. But I'm telling you, if anybody now knows Steve Mullen, he's the most honest guy I've met. I've known him for years. When I first came on in 2001, he was a deputy and he was so calm, cool, honest, and I enjoyed working with him. I didn't work with him a lot on the road, but if I ever got a call and Steve Mullen was there, I knew it was going to go smooth and I had no issues about him at all. And then he became the chief, and he's just an honest guy. And I know he feels bad, but he had no control. What does he feel bad about? That's just things that we can't control when technology doesn't work. Oh, so he feels bad that he deleted all those. I mean, erased all of those. Or that he discovered that they were erased. Whatever. Whatever words you want to use there, but I think he erased them. We're not withholding any information or any interviews that we did. It just happened and it's unfortunate, but it happens in every investigation. Who gives an answer this long and all backwards? And yeah, he went on for like 2 pages. The host says, okay, well, thank you for explaining that. While we're on the topic, then let me jump into Mullins was a concern, but let me jump into Sheriff Liggett. He was running for sheriff at that time that Richard Allen became a suspect and was arrested. There's a lot of talk. Yeah, like he arrested a scapegoat, so he had somebody so he could run for office. I mean, I admit that the timing of that does not look good. There's a lot of conspiracy theory about wanting to win an election, and I know you're not Sheriff Liggett, but anything you can say there about that? Jerry Holman says, yeah, I think that's ridiculous and very appalling to everybody involved because I'm not corrupt. I'm not a liar. I'm a lot of things. I've been accused of a lot of things, and I'm a lot of things. I'm not perfect, but I can tell you that I would not jeopardize my career, and nor would Tony Liggett ask me to jeopardize my career to do something like this. And first of all, so now you gotta go back and say we purposely hid that tip before Sheriff Liggett was gonna run for sheriff. What tip? Again, what tip? There's no tip. It's just you found a file of somebody who said he was there, so you can pin it on him. That's the only thing that they found, in my opinion. He had no intention to run for sheriff when this investigation started in 2017. To my knowledge, maybe in his mind, that was a dream of his someday, but he never said, hey, I'm going to run for sheriff in 4 to 8 years or whatever. So then, I mean, now you gotta come up with these ridiculous, outrageous conspiracy theories, and everybody involved is very passionate about their job. So now the public wants us to stop the investigation, wait until Tony wins or loses, and then arrest the guy that we believe took the girls' lives. We found the information, we acted on it as best we could, and within a couple of weeks we made an arrest, and nothing to do with an election. I mean, that is a Republican county, and people saying, oh, he was losing, he was Republican running against an independent or Democrat. That was a very Republican county, and in my opinion, I don't know, because I'm not into politics, but the Republican was going to win that election whether we found this tip and arrested Richard Allen or not. So I think it's just appalling to everybody involved and anybody that believes that. That's just ridiculous to me. I mean, you can't make this up. that would take a lot of time, effort, and resources clear back in 2017 to stage an election in 2022. Ridiculous. It's just ridiculous to me. Yeah, it is. It really is. You, Jerry Holman, are ridiculous. Um, The host continues and says, "Yeah, thank you for letting me talk about that. And thank you for your transparency also during this interview. I want to say that a big issue with this case, I think, is the lack of transparency. Yeah, I have to admit, I feel like you're being very transparent. Before this interview, you said, I have nothing to hide. The gag order has been lifted. Can you talk to us about that? Because I feel like a lot of these things that we're discussing today have to do with the lack of transparency or theories about the case running rampant. Anything you want to speak about that?" Jerry Holman responds, "Transparency comes up a lot, and I believe in transparency." Yeah, sure you do. As you can see, I'm going to be honest with you. Yeah, we've already caught you in several lies, Jerry, but cool. I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm not going to voice any other people's opinions on these. This is just mine. But transparency is key. Is that why Gull didn't allow cameras in the courtroom? Because transparency is key in Carroll County? I think it's not key. But we often get put in between a rock and a hard place when it comes to protecting the integrity of the investigation. I think we thought long and hard about what information we could release. The state police had policies and procedures that we follow, and we also don't want information out there that the perpetrator and only the perpetrator knows. That helps us solve cases. And then the gag order was in place, so we can't defend ourselves or talk about the issues that people want. I do agree that the gag orders definitely don't help in this case because it proves that there is no transparency, and that's a problem. And he's saying here that transparency is key. It's got to be transparent, but you guys haven't been transparent. Regardless of gag order or not, we still haven't seen evidence. We haven't seen certain things that Judge Gull has blocked from public view. She basically impounded everything. So, there is no transparency in this case. But I think that the public is unrealistic thinking that the investigators are going to talk about every step of the investigation in the public while the investigation or trial is still going on. I just think that's totally unrealistic. What I think is realistic is what we did. We gave information to the media that we thought would help us identify who the perpetrator was. And those were very strategic. And we don't like to talk about investigated strategies because we don't necessarily want the public to know what we can and can't do to find out who committed the crime. We don't want the public to know what we can and can't do to figure out who committed the crimes. What are you guys doing to solve crimes that would infuriate the public? Are you guys maybe being unethical, fudging evidence, getting rid of recorded interviews, taping over them? I mean, is there something you guys are doing? I mean, in that sentence alone, it makes me think that there is something that they shouldn't be doing that they're doing. Because if everybody knows that we can do this or that, then they're going to stop doing that. Obviously, people know about DNA and fingerprints, so they wear clothes or protective equipment to not allow that. And everybody knows that technology allows us to look at cell phones. So now people leave their cell phones at home. So if we talk about all the investigative strategies and every piece of evidence that we have, that would violate the integrity of the investigation and make it much harder for us to solve crimes. So I wish we could tell everything. And even now, I don't think the public is ever going to know everything about this investigation. I wish they could. I wish everybody could come out, or everything could come. No, he said everybody. All right. Not a lot of people are going to want to talk because everything I say today is going to get twisted by the defense and they're going to say, "Oh, look, he said this," when he really means what he said was this. So a lot of people are afraid to talk. I'm not. I have nothing to hide. I want the truth to come out, and the truth is we did a very thorough investigation. Keep telling yourselves that. It doesn't make it true. We established probable cause and arrested the right person for this crime, but transparency is key. But again, we get put in between a rock and a hard place, and we can only do so much. The host says, I hear you. I appreciate you and your transparency. I feel like you have very much been transparent. You mentioned that I didn't know that Richard Allen had declined a polygraph multiple times, but you couldn't share that in court because it was prejudicial. And that makes sense. You can't tell the jury now about that. What is it, him refusing one or not? It can't come into, it's not admissible. So whether he takes it or not has no bearing on anything. I mean, I do agree that it would be prejudicial, and I'm glad that they didn't say, yeah, he denied taking one or declined, but it really does, like, that is how a juror would probably think, but in most cases, no. I mean, it really isn't that big of a deal. Now where was I? Um, you mentioned that Richard Allen declined the polygraph. You can't let the jury know about that. There are a couple other things I know about that you guys weren't able to, or the prosecution, I should say, wasn't able to share during the trial. One of them being a video of Richard Allen being angry in a video. Can you share what that video was and why the prosecution might have wanted to share that video or anything else that you weren't able to share in court? The polygraph bit is interesting, she says. Jerry Holman says, yeah, there was probably a few things, but I don't know the trial rules and I'm not an attorney. I know the criminal law and traffic law and investigative techniques and strategies, but when it comes to the trial rules, I learned a lot. I joke around with Prosecutor McLeland saying I'm an apprentice attorney because I've learned so much about what you can do and can't do because I was like, why don't we say this? You can't. It's too prejudicial. And I understand that, and I respect the judge for her decision, although I was angry that we couldn't play that video. I think the reason that we wanted to play it, and again, I'm not the prosecutor, but the reason I thought we wanted to play that video is because they were trying to make him out as, I think the term they used, a fragile egg, and he's not. And we thought he was faking some of those actions. So during this video at Cass County, so it's a Cass County, he's in custody when he gets angry. I'm sure I'd be angry too if I was in custody. So during this trial, or during this Cass County video, where he probably had 3 or 4 incidents while he was at Cass County, and the one was he became very abusive verbally. He was sitting on his cot and reading the Bible, and he just broke out, had an outburst, started yelling and screaming, made a throat slashing motion, and started threatening to KILL everybody and started banging his head on the wall. Okay, this is psychosis. That's not an angry moment. I'm sorry. That's psychosis. That's not just an angry outburst. He's banging his head on the wall, punching the door, and within seconds, I mean, he just turned into this violent human being. And I think that showed that he has that ability to lose his temper and become a monster. And then within seconds, he calmed back down, sat on a bed, and said, no, I'm fine. Was he being given hell at all at this time? Because likely he was. They wanted to take him to a padded cell, and he was just able to control it like that. And I think okay. So basically, Holman's position is he was controlling it, he was faking it, he was doing it to get attention or get what he wanted or whatever. Okay, but what did he get from it? What exactly did he get out of it? What did he benefit from? Or how did he benefit? Anyways, and I think that, in my opinion, he got angry at the bottom of the hill on January 13th. The girl said or did something, or something happened, and he's capable of doing that. He's capable of losing his control and coming into and being the beast that he is that day and taking the lives of 2 innocent teenage girls. So I think that was kind of important. But again, the judge ruled against it, and it was too prejudicial, and I believe that she made the right decision. Although I don't understand it, sometimes I think we should put everything out there. Same thing. I'm sure the defense thinks Why couldn't we put the Odinism in while the judge ruled the Indiana statute clearly states that you have to establish a direct criminal nexus with the third party defense? Okay. And they couldn't do that. They had three ways to do it, and they couldn't do it. Not that Judge Gull was biased or anything. It was that the defense just failed in their job in creating some kind of connection or nexus between all of the individuals in Frank's memo. And we knew that because, again, we spent months trying to tie those people to the crime, and there's just not any evidence or facts to tie them into it. So that was another decision that she made, and I think that those are the reasons why. And she followed the law on those decisions. Whether we like it or not, it's probably the right thing to do. Without a doubt, it's the right thing to do. The host says there was no nexus, there was no probable cause. In other words, you couldn't add that third party sort of theory to the case. Holeman says, you just can't say Lauren did it, I didn't do it, Lauren did it. They have to have a direct criminal nexus or connection to the crime scene. How about saliva on the crime scene? DNA that wasn't tested from, was it two or three other, I can't remember now, it's two or three other males, unidentified male profiles that were found on the girls in private areas. And that never gets brought up, but let's talk about that for a second. There was DNA on the girls' genitals, potentially saliva. Um, there was other DNA, saliva, in other places on the girls besides just their genitals. But this DNA was never. It doesn't match Richard Allen. He was excluded from it. But yet there's three other individuals, and it's not Richard Allen. So why are we here? Where are we in the Twilight Zone? They have to have a direct criminal nexus or a nexus to the crime scene, and the only person that had that connection was Richard Allen, nobody else. God, they are so full of themselves. And they really think that they can like just pull the wool over our eyes and we're not going to question it. So that's why they didn't allow it. That's my opinion. Again, I'm not an attorney or definitely not a judge, but that's how it was explained to me. Then the host asks, and not having that third party theory was technically a loss, I guess, for the defense. You could say, who wanted that in? They wrote their Frank's memo, but I want to point out too that the prosecution not being able to put in that moment of Richard Allen raging and doing this with his hand gesture, that was a win for the defense. Sometimes I think there's also the idea because there was no video and audio in court. I want to say this. I saw Judge Goal rule a lot for both sides, for the defense and for the prosecution. Well, what I say to that is baloney. Anyone who's been following this case knows that Judge Gall denies everything that, especially pre-trial motions and things, she denied or just refused to even rule on for months and months and months, which you're not supposed to do. So Judge Gull has shown her bias over and over and over again, and yet they still want to gaslight us and pretend that Judge Gull is on the up and up and she's, someone who we should respect as a judge, when really she should be in prison for what she did and her mishandling of this case. That's how I feel about her. But anyways. So the host asks or says, I think what she was working towards was a clean trial, in other words. And Holman says, yeah, I think early on in one of the hearings she stated, I don't exactly remember how she said, but they were talking about she didn't know the facts and she made a comment to, I don't need to know the facts. I'm the referee. I'm just the referee, basically. I just need to know is what you're wanting fair and legally obtainable. So then why weren't the defense able to bring up third party suspects? Um, because that made it unfair and totally leaning towards the prosecution there, but whatever. He continues on and says, if not, then I'm not going to allow it. And I thought she did a great job. Again, I've worked a lot of trials and I think she was very firm but fair. In my opinion, I think most judges are because they're going to be scrutinized in every decision that they made as well. And she knows that. And so I think she took all that under consideration and made the correct decisions to the best of her ability. The host says, I have so many questions for you. You mentioned a bit about a theory of what happened and that perhaps one of the girls said something and it put Richard Allen into a rage. Do you personally have any theories on what happened that day on February 13th, 2017, when Abby and Libby lost their lives? Can you take us to what you think happened that day? He just went into a rage. That's total speculation. You have nothing to say otherwise that that's what happened or didn't happen. You think, where is he just pulling that out of thin air? But cool. Let's see what he says. Well, I think the evidence and the facts clearly indicate that they were out there, dropped off, possibly to meet somebody, or maybe just to go out there and enjoy a nice, unseasonably warm day. I'm going to stop here for a second and just let you guys know that one, not one person described seeing the girls there that day. And there were many witnesses, many eyewitnesses that they spoke to, many witnesses that they called to the stand that day. There was that group of like 4 high school girls that one of them said that she gave a description. Bree, uh, what's her name? Bree something. I can't remember now. But she gave the description of a man that didn't look like Richard Allen. And others, not one person said that they saw Abby and Libby either on the bridge or walking near the bridge or anything. So, do we even know that the girls were there? How do we know that the girls were there? Do we even have evidence besides finding them at the crime scene? Was there evidence of them being anywhere else there that day? And there's a lot of people theorizing all these things, and like not one person has identified Rick Allen as bridge guy, and the prosecution has not identified Allen as bridge guy, and they haven't even proven that bridge guy is the guy, the perpetrator. So none of this makes sense to me how we're here. And the girls haven't been seen by any eyewitness on the bridge that day. So where were the girls? Remember that there were photos taken from Libby's phone. Maybe someone took Libby's phone because those photos, if you recall, um, the one photo, the Snapchat photo of Abby on the bridge was not found in her Snapchat history. So, or her phone history or whatever. So, how did that photo get onto her Snapchat if it wasn't on both her phone and her Snapchat? And like none of it makes sense. I really think that there was some kind of plan and they planned a diversion. Somebody, whoever the perpetrators are, they planned some kind of diversion. And whether the girls were there or not, I do not know for sure. All right, so Holman says they were dropped off an unseasonably warm day, and in Richard's own words, he laid in wait. What words are you saying that he said that? Because he never said that. He stalked them, he kidnapped them by telling them to go down the hill by pointing a gun at them. I believe he was going to SA them at the bottom of the hill underneath the trestle. My theory is that he probably commanded them to get naked and was going to do some sort of pleasing, gratifying acts there, but the van driven by Mr. Weber spooked him. The van, the van of Mr. Weber that supposedly spooked Richard Allen. They're saying that this was the smoking gun that approved his confession was real or whatever, according to Dr. Walla, because of this mention of the van. Well, there was plenty of mention of the van on social media, and we know that Dr. Walla was on social media talking to people about the Delphi case and going back and forth, treating Allen and talking about the Delphi case online. So this whole van theory, she could have easily put that van theory in his head. All right, so he probably heard the van. I mean, that's the long lane. You can hear it before it gets right up there. And the host says, "You can. I've heard it." He says, "Yeah." So I think he then took them across the frigid creek and was being selfish. How did he take them across the creek? Were the girls' clothes wet? The phones weren't wet. Phone was still working, so it didn't get submerged. How did they go across the creek? And was being selfish and was a coward. Okay. I think he treated them like animals. And again, that's where my anger comes into how how one human being could treat two other human beings that way. I think that he was selfish and thought that they were going to turn him in, that he failed to kidnap them. He failed to gratify himself, uh, personally, and he slit their throats. He put sticks on them, and how he can go on and live his life, I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but he did. I don't know how Jerry Holman can go on and live his life so carefree after knowing that he helped railroad an innocent man and put him in prison. And I think there's a lot of other theories, but that's the facts, and the evidence clearly indicate that's what happened. So that's what I believe happened, and it's unfortunate, very unfortunate. Didn't need to happen. So a van spooked him. He got the girls undressed and then left Libby naked and made Abby put Libby's clothes on? That doesn't make any sense either. So, huh? Anyways, all right. So the host says, "From what I could tell and learn and understand, it seemed as if there was some, let's say, overkill with Libby. Do you feel that too? Because you're law enforcement, not me. And so this is me sitting in court. What was that about? Or what are your feelings on that as law enforcement?" Holman says, "My best theory on that is she was probably bigger, stronger, and maybe a little harder to control. That's my only explanation with that. I don't know what was going through his mind, but to me, that would be the logical answer is she was probably a little bit physically stronger. Abby wasn't near as big and developed yet. She's still young, but I don't know. I mean, only three people know, and two, unfortunately, are deceased, and the other one doesn't want to take responsibility for his actions, so I don't know if we'll ever know." Do you guys think that Jerry Holman actually believes that Rick Allen is guilty, or does he know the truth and he's just playing the long game and trying to, gaslight us all into believing what he wants us to believe? The host says, "One thing you mentioned is why they were there. They were dropped off because they either wanted to enjoy an unseasonably warm day, or you mentioned that they might have wanted to meet somebody there. What do you mean by that?" Holman says, "Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of speculation about Keegan Klein and the Anthony Shots account. Remember, Keegan Klein is the 30-something-year-old male. He's like an overweight male who, with dark hair, he was pretending to be this Anthony Shots account that Libby was talking to, and he was using different images to try to, catfish her. And he is currently serving time for trying to solicit minors for things. And he's got a whole line of charges, I think, for solicitation and child, that CP, the P word rhymes with corn. All right, so the Anthony Schatz account, but we know that Anthony Schatz was communicating with Libby and some of her friends. We don't know for sure if that's why they were going out there or not. Unfortunately, with Snapchat and Kick and is that Musically? I don't know what these apps are. And some of those apps that people use to communicate, we can tell people are communicating, but sometimes we can't tell the content. But it wouldn't surprise me if maybe they thought somebody was going to be out there or maybe a friend or something like that. So that's what I meant by that. And I think that if the girls did go there and did get a ride there, I think maybe they did, perhaps they did go there, walk the bridge, but I still don't know because nobody saw them. But if they did go there, maybe they met up with someone or they went to that end of the bridge where there was, if you went down the hill, there was that area where a car could pull in and maybe they met someone there and took off from there. That's my guess personally, but we still, I mean, they did not investigate properly, so we don't know, and that's a problem. The host says, did I finish reading that? He says we can tell people are communicating, but we can't tell the content. Yeah, okay. So that's what I meant by that. The host says, "Do you think it could have been Keegan? Do you think maybe they were perhaps wanting to meet Keegan or a cute boy at the trail or something? Possibility that Anthony Schatz they thought might be out there, who obviously was a fake persona that Keegan was using. I don't think Keegan was out there. I mean, again, evidence indicates that he was not that day and time. So, if there's evidence that would have proved that, then he would be in prison for that as well. I mean, obviously, he's in prison for being a predator that he is, but we would not withhold that. But we would not withhold that. If we had probable cause to believe that he was involved in this, then we would definitely file charges. Oh, so they wouldn't withhold the information that he was guilty of something else. And if any evidence comes up that he was, then we would pursue that. We would write a report, give it to the prosecutor, and he would determine whether or not that would be the case. The host asks, or goes on a long-winded thing here. I do want to go back to Odinism really quickly because Odinism became a very, very big deal when the defense wrote their Franks memo discussing their defense, which again was that this was an Odinistic, ritualistic, KILLing. You've mentioned that this was something that had been investigated by law enforcement. There was no evidence, there was no nexus, there was no probable cause, but it became a really big deal once the defense presented this and the public got a hold of that part of the investigation, as I guess you could say. Was this a way to get around the gag order? Because you mentioned the gag order was to prevent parts of the investigation getting out, and I genuinely don't know. I'm genuinely asking. And so that's one question I have. And then maybe the reason I'm asking it, and you can answer that, maybe the reason I'm asking it too is because there was talk at the press conference about the defense not adhering to the gag order. So I guess this is a two-part question. Is that part of it? Yes or no? And how did the defense negate the gag order, if that's true? Jerry Holman says, yeah, I believe the easy answer would be yes. This is bullshit. They never they never tried to get around the gag order. If you actually listen to, I believe it was the Defense Diaries interview with Andrew Baldwin, who said that they actually asked for the Franks memo. They wanted it in writing, like they needed to know whatever it was so that they could get their, Franks hearing and So the prosecution basically asked for it and they provided it. And then once it came out, the prosecution basically villainized the defense the whole time. Um, and it wasn't a gag. You're supposed to be able to write about things in court filings. And the state of Indiana says you can't file a Frank's memo under seal. So there's that as well. So they did everything by the book, what they were supposed to do. And yet here we have law enforcement smearing their name yet again and saying, yeah, I believe the easy answer would be yes, they violated the gag order. He's not a lawyer. He doesn't effing know. I really don't like this man. Moving on. I think that it was obvious to me from day one that they wanted to try this in the media. They wanted to plant seeds of doubt to potential jurors. And then when the gag order is instated, I think that, again, I don't know exactly why, but it appeared to me that in all their motions, that they were directing those to the media and social media. Oh, give me a break. All the motions were in defense of their either themselves or their client because they've had to defend themselves when Nick McClellan starts coming at them and saying that they're misconduct and they've committed misconduct and all this stuff. So, you know what? This whole thing is a bunch of BS. And then it was reinstated, blah, blah, blah. Where did I leave off? Social media, hoping that they could get those outrageous conspiracy theories out there that someone might believe and might someday be a potential juror. That's my opinion. It seemed like all their motions, first of all, had a lot of over embellished facts and lies about us. About us. It's personal, man. These law enforcement officers are pissed that these lawyers found their misconduct, found them, caught them red handed. And so now law enforcement is doing their damn best to smear everybody on the defense team. And of course, the defendant, because what is he doing? He's going on PR tours and talking crap about Richard Allen and lying about the investigation. And we're just supposed to accept that. And the defense attorneys are supposed to sit back and do nothing. That's basically what he wants. And I thought that was wrong. I thought that was very unethical strategy that they used. And I think that they continued to do that through all the hearings and with all the motions. And I think they continued even when the trial started by still continuing to communicate with social media and social media outlets. How? They didn't communicate with anybody. I didn't get any information from the defense. I got all my information from reporters that were boots on the ground reporting at the scene in the courthouse. Not one of them was the defense attorneys. But okay. It just appeared to me I didn't watch the news. I very rarely watch the news, but I purposely did not watch the news during the trial, and I don't watch podcasts. Sorry, YouTubers and content creators will hate me for this, but I don't watch them. You're on a YouTube show. I didn't even know they existed until after this case started, shortly after 2017. Well, yeah, how do you like being part of a bunch of people's YouTube shows and being questioned about your ethical behavior or unethical, I should say? And then the host says, "Ta-da! Here we are." Jerry Holman says, "Here you are." But I have friends and family members that watch, and during the trial, they would call and check on me. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm sitting in there watching." "You sat in there?" "I thought everything was going well." It is like a roller coaster ride. You have good days, bad days. The judge rules on things, and you think, okay, good. And some of the jury questions, you're like, okay, you're very in tune. You're asking the right questions. I think we're doing well. But then what the media and some of the social media outlets were reporting was one sided. What are you? You work for the state. Everything coming out of your mouth is one sided. And that's what I And that's what I was getting from family members and friends are like, it's not looking good. I said, no, we're doing good. The facts in the case, the truth is coming out, and the jury's going to see everything. So, and I can't explain why, but I'm only assuming that they were trying to get their narrative out by pushing some of that. And again, I think that's not right. And I think that's not all. But some media outlets were biased towards the defense, and some social media outlets are biased towards the defense. And there's probably some that are biased towards prosecution. And I think as a reporter, I'm not a journalist, but I think most mainstream media outlets need to stay down the middle and non biased. Well, mainstream media outlets, I don't know if you know this, but they're definitely not down the middle and non biased if you are paying attention at all. So people aren't getting their news from there. And that's why they're going to YouTube because we YouTube creators dive into the court documents and the police reports and find out what is actually happening and not just listening to the mouthpiece, Jerry Holman, saying, I'm not a lawyer. Trust me, bro. Ugh. All right. So the host says 100%. Jerry Holman says 100%. And I think there's really no regulations on the social media and the YouTubers and the content creators. Oh no, you want to censor us? Great. That sounds like a totalitarian kind of whatever. So they can get away with it more. I think some of the mainstream media and those journalists have to stay more focused and more towards the middle. And I just think that the strategy that they used was, to me, not right. Get bent, Jerry Holman. That's what I say. The host says, well, that's really interesting to hear your perspective of that. I want to tell you a couple of things I heard during the trial. A national producer said to me that she was talking to Rosie, and Rosie said YouTubers are a part of our job and they always will be. In other words, working with YouTubers, I saw Ajay, the defense attorney, walk up to a YouTuber in court and pass her a sticky note that said something, and then she walked back and smiled at her. I don't know what it said, if it was important or not, but it was an interesting relationship to observe. Who gives a crap if another YouTuber creator is in the audience and she happens to be on the defense's side, perhaps, and she befriends the attorneys on that side and gains their trust? What does it matter to you? You're sitting here interviewing Jerry Holman on one of the most biased interviews I've ever seen. At least it's not edited as deep as much as the M Sheet podcasts episodes are, but still edited. And as you could tell, she had to get approved questions beforehand because she was like, "Well, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but." Anyways, all right. So she observed that. Whatever. Who cares? What does it have to do with you? I'm just pointing out some interesting dynamics, though, in what I observed as far as certain, you're right, social media, as you explained, or podcasts that maybe don't have any regulations sort of working for certain sides. It was interesting to me. It was interesting to me to say the least. Holman says, and it is interesting, and I would add to this is the main reason I'm talking to you and other podcasters or YouTubers or content creators, and I don't even know if I know the difference between. She says, that's all the same. You got them all. You nailed it. Yay. He says, but the reason I want the truth out there, and it's very harmful to the community for some of that false information. You just don't like it because it's about you and revealing your negative characteristics. And that's why you don't like it. That's why you don't like us talking about the truth about the Delphi case. He says we get death threats all the time, and that's fine. Threaten me, but not my family. I won't talk about my family. I have a great family. You just said you won't talk about your family. Then the next sentences are I have a great family. I have a wonderful wife, 3 children. Well, okay. Well, now I know you have a wife and 3 kids. I will never say their names. They're all married and I have 7 grandkids. Okay, well, now he's got 7 grandkids too. I'll never say their names because I don't want them harassed, and they have been. I probably could do a Google search and find Holmans in the area, but whatever. Not that I want to, or not that I have any desire to go there. I don't even know where Delphi is in relation to Chicago, but um anyways, they're all married, blah blah blah. I don't want them harassed, and they have been. But more importantly, the victims' families, leave them alone. Stop putting those disgusting photographs that were leaked by whoever, however you want to put it. I'm not here to debate but what I am here to debate is that was your if that was your loved ones, you would not want those photos out there on the internet. For Becky Patty said generational effects. What? Like Becky Patty said, generational effects. Libby's nieces and nephews are going to have to see that, and we're going to have to explain that someday. You think that they're not going to want to ask questions? I mean, you should explain it to them anyways. And I don't know. What this makes no sense. Okay. And that doesn't prove anything. Those photos don't prove anything, and I think that's where the hate needs to stop. They think it's funny when they post my head on Shrek or say bad things about me. He's very egotistical and accuse me of all this stuff, which is it's just not true. I have broad shoulders and a thick neck. Come after me all you want, but leave family members and community members alone. And I think a lot, like I said earlier, Lauren, a lot of people don't want to talk about that, don't want to talk to anybody about this because of the threats that we've gotten through emails and people getting our cell phone numbers and family members' cell phone numbers. And I just hope that that stops sooner or later. The host says, I was threatened too. I was threatened. They said, show up at the courthouse. Yeah, show up at the courthouse. My husband's at home seeing the emails coming and going. What is going on? Are you okay? And like being very, very worried. You said that you don't know how the crime scene photos got out. You don't want to blame anybody, but I am going to point something out that in the victim impact statements by both Mike Patty and Becky Patty, they blamed the defense and they were upset that Richard Allen's counsel were so careless with the photos in their offices that somebody got a hold of them, took the photos of the crime scene photos and put them on the internet, and they brought up Rosie sharing something in an October 2023 hearing about what he said about these photos being released. And I'm bringing this up because I've never seen actually a victim impact statement where they didn't just talk to how they've been hurt by the suspect, by the convict, by the criminal, by the person convicted, but by the counsel. And they brought up something that Rosie said. And when I read their victim impact statements online, and you can see those victim impact statements or listen to them, I read them verbatim on our channel, and we'll have a link to that in the description of the video because I think the victims' voices are so important in this case. And so that's why I'm bringing this up too. This is what Rosie this is what Rosie said. Now we can, let me see. So this is what he said. He said, look, I saw the pictures. I know where those came from. And if you know, the point here is I'm going to say this maybe a little loosely, but forgive me. I don't care. I don't care that all of this stuff is out there because it's been out there for 5 or 6 years. I don't have the time. He doesn't have the time, meaning Andrew Baldwin. What? I don't have the time, meaning Andrew Baldwin. He doesn't have the time to sit and try to marshal all of the stuff while the case is ongoing because there's no end to it. But at this point, the point is the court needs to have some context that this is nothing new. That's what the victim impact statements were referring to when they said that somebody on the defense team didn't seem to care. And they asked if he would care if it was his children's photos. And that is so inappropriate. And while you point out you're not putting blame, it wasn't Rosie that took the photos, but it was the photos that the defense had possession of, that somebody took a photo of, that they were carelessly strewn in. And so I just want to point out that because the victims stated that in their impact statement and they wanted to share, that and they're hurt for generations and generations to come. And Judge Gull said herself that she hadn't considered the generational impact and that she was going to take that into consideration. I don't know if you have anything to say to that. It wasn't really a question, but I think I just wanted to share that here. Okay. It's something I hadn't read Rosie's statement or what he had said. And I don't know if you have anything to say to that. And Holman, of course, he's got something to say. He says, well, I would say that we had those photos from day one pretty much, and none of those photos were released until after discovery. Now, they accused us of leaking some crime scene photos, but they were confused. Oh, it was just a confusion on their part. When we accidentally, or when we purposely leak photos, it's just a confusion on the defense's part. But when the defense leaks photos, that's all their fault too. So it's always going to be the defense's fault somehow. There were some photos taken by citizens of the clothes in the creek that were released, but those were not from law enforcement. They were not crime scene photos. Once the crime scene was secured and photos were taken, none of those were released to the public. Now, was there some information being leaked second, third hand? Absolutely, but not crime scene photos. Oh no, not that. Other stuff was being leaked. Sure, we'll admit to that, but not the crime scene photos. Oh my God, this guy is such an idiot. And I think they should be held responsible for that. I do think that they should be responsible for securing those photos. And how all that happened is just, in my opinion, was done intentionally. And I'll just leave it at that. The host says, and why do you think it was done intentionally? Holman says again, same thing. I think that some of the photos were not just of the girls, but they were of things that they thought would indicate that it was a ritualistic sacrifice, or one was the infamous spatter on the tree, and that they were trying to say was painted on there or purposely put on there, and it just wasn't because he's a spatter expert apparently. And they were trying to get opinions from the public to say that they thought that that was what they were trying to portray it to be, which it wasn't. And I do believe that that's again they were trying to take the jury to taint the jury pool. The host says Mike Patty brought up in his victim impact statement that he didn't believe that the justice system consisted of lies being spread, and the forefathers who created our justice system would be shocked and appalled that this was the American way. I'm paraphrasing what he said. I have his exact verbatim, again, victim impact statement. I don't want to, you can hear it verbatim again, in the description of the video here, but that's what, as I recall, he implied, what lies was this one of the lies? What were the lies that you think Mike Patty was referring to? And Holman says, I would probably refer to the Frank's memo. Most of the information in there is either over embellished or lies about investigators. They got it from an Odin report. They got everything from police reports, the Odin report, all of it was from discovery turned over to them from the prosecution in the first trial, or the first time around, before they got taken off the case, and then they got all the discovery they had to return, and then they got it back, and none of it was in any kind of order anymore. So they had to go through all the discovery again. It's like they were starting from scratch. But yet, yeah, let's blame the defense and the lying Frank's memo that they had, which we know has valid truth to it. And I think that that's what he was talking about, in my opinion. I don't know for sure. I think that would be a fair assessment. But yeah, I agree with him. I don't think the defense attorney's job is to lie about certain things about an investigation or make them up or over embellish the facts. You know who can lie for their job? Law enforcement. You know who can't lie for their job? Defense attorneys. Well, prosecutors and all attorneys. They're not supposed to lie in open court. They're not supposed to lie in court records and court filings. And Jerry Holman has just earlier himself told us that he likes to use deceptive tactics. So who's the liar? Who's the embellisher of facts? It's not the defense. This makes me so angry. All right. And I think that's what he was talking about, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I agree with him. I don't think the defense attorney's job is to lie about certain things about an investigation or make them up or embellish the facts. I think their job is to make sure that their client gets a fair and impartial hearing or trial, which is what they tried to do the entire time, but they were facing roadblocks every step of the way with Judge Gull and law enforcement and the prosecution trying to eliminate their ability to defend themselves. Um, and he says, and I think they went above and beyond that and really attacked the character of everybody involved, including the family. The host says, you sat close to Richard Allen during the trial, and I've explained this to people. I've explained it again. Richard Allen. So the gallery was in the back. Richard Allen was in front of us and he was looking directly at Judge Gull. So when Richard Allen turned to an angle, those in the gallery could see his eyes. He was, if he was looking directly at Judge Gull, we couldn't. So we couldn't see everything. Judge Gull made a mention of his eye rolling in court, and that surprised a lot of us. I didn't see it, although somebody to the side in the gallery did say they saw it once. What did you notice about Richard Allen during the trial that we might have missed? Holman says he had some odd behavior. There's that word again, odd behavior. Of the rolling the eyes, some other reactions with his hands during some certain parts of the trial. I observed him writing something on a sticky note, showing it to one of the attorneys, and then grabbing it and eating it a couple times. I thought that was very odd. You don't know. Okay. I don't even know if I believe Jerry Holman, but whatever. Even if he did do that, I don't care. I don't think that that means he's guilty. I was trying to focus more on the jury and the witnesses. We had very little interaction. He did speak to me a couple of times. I gave him a bottle of water early on. They didn't have water yet. So I gave him one of my bottles that was on the table and maybe a couple of breath mints. And he is a human being, and I'm going to treat human beings like human beings should be treated. I think that he needs to take responsibility for his actions and be punished for those actions, but he's still a human. He dropped his glasses. I picked them up. I mean, very little interaction with him, but his behavior was what I would think. He was trying to stay emotionless, but at times I could see some emotion from him. The host asks, what about one thing I noticed? And again, I was behind, so I could see everything, so I'm very curious about this. And when they were showing some of the most heartbreaking stuff on the smart TV, the crime scene photos, the autopsy photos, photos that honestly would create an audible gasp in the gallery. They were so upsetting. From what I could tell, he was just looking at them the entire time, but I couldn't always see his expression. Can you share, maybe, did you look at him during those moments when he was seeing some of these horrible things on the screen? Did he look? Because I know there were times where I felt like he didn't look at things that had to do with him, but I was curious. I've been wanting to ask somebody that had a better view. What do you care if he was looking at the screen or not? What does it matter? If you feel like you've been railroaded, any reaction you give is because you are frustrated with the way your proceedings are going or whatever. If you are guilty, everything can be misconstrued for, well, he's guilty, or everybody can, you can take all of his little mannerisms and say, well, he didn't look at the screen, so obviously he's guilty. Like that makes no it makes absolutely no sense. But that's how these people think for some reason, and I just don't get it. But anyways, staring uh he says, yeah, I don't recall it exactly, but there was times where he would just kind of look at me like he was staring into space over the TV when some of the when some of those things were. Sometimes we would look away or look down, but I wasn't again focused on him. But yeah, I would say little to no emotion, whether he was, like I said, staring off. He stared into space a lot. It looked to me like at the ceiling or at the wall, or he would read his Bible occasionally. He had a pocket Bible and he would pull that out and read it sometimes. But yeah, I didn't notice a lot about him, to be honest. And then the host asks, have you met or talked to any of the jurors? Can I ask you that? He says, no, I have not. I've never met them or talked to them, and I don't know if anybody has. I've never been told. I would think that the prosecutors or the prosecutor may have communicated with the foreman. That's what they're called, I think, chairperson, but I don't know. I don't know of any involvement with anybody. No, they kept them pretty secure. They were in and out of the courtroom. Normally, after a trial, the prosecution is allowed, the investigators are allowed to go talk to the jury, but yeah, not in this case. To my knowledge, nobody talked to them. And then the host says, okay, I think I just want to end. Did you know? So, this recording, everyone, while our hidden gems will be watching this a couple of days later, today, the date of this recording is December 27th, 2024, and it is actually Libby's 22nd birthday today. And honestly, for me, it's heartbreaking to think about that she was a 14-year-old girl and she would be a woman today, celebrating, as her mother said in her victim impact statement with her. They shared a birthday very close in days, and that birthdays are now hard for her. You know, this really is, I think that when I was at the trial, I often felt like sometimes the girls were forgotten or it wasn't about these two brave girls who, as you pointed out, helped solve their own homicide. Abby and Libby, as the prosecution explained, Abby hid the phone. Libby took the video. Anything you want to say to the surviving victim family or anything that you think about Abby and Libby today? Harry, so Harry Jerry Holman says, yeah, I mean, I would say that the most important part of this interview is that I have to say next, and you could probably delete all the other stuff because I don't care about that. I care about justice for Abby and Libby. Although I don't think the family is ever going to get closure, there are always going to be two huge holes in everybody's hearts that knew them and involved in this investigation. But it's all about them. It's all about them, and that's the most important thing. It's not about me. It's not about the prosecutor. It's not about anybody involved, the expert witnesses, or even the defense. It should be about justice for Abby and Libby. And I think, obviously, I need not know the two girls before this, but I believe just from what I've learned over the last 7 years and 10 months, I think they were going to do great things. I think they were going to go on to be great people and hopefully help us solve crimes as they did on February 13th of 2017. I think they were great. I think they are their true heroes. I hate when people call me a hero. I'm not a hero. This is the second time he said that, so he loves being called a hero, everybody. This guy has got a huge ego, if you cannot tell just by reading like the way he talks. He brings himself up more than most people. Um, but he's not a hero, guys. He's not a hero. They are. They're the heroes in this case. And I'll always hold a special place in my heart for those two girls and their families. And I've said this before, it's hard for me to say without getting emotional, but I hope someday I meet them in heaven and I'm able to give them a huge or a hug and thank them for making me a better person, a better father, a better husband, a better grandfather, a better investigator. Everything that I've experienced through this investigation is making me a better person, and I owe that to Abby and Libby. So again, it's all about him, and he's a better person now because of them. What? I mean, okay, whatever. And then that's the end. She thanks him, and that's all. Wow. What do you think of Jerry Holman? I think he's an egotistical, lying piece of crap. Let's look at a pretty bridge instead of the words. I, yeah, Jerry Holman is a liar. There's so many lies that we picked out of there. And just because someone's behavior is odd to you doesn't make it wrong or it doesn't mean that they're, guilty of some crime. Seriously, what is wrong with our juries today that they did not see right through this? I just don't understand it. I put a post out on X recently. You know what? I'm going to pull it up because it's a good post. Hold on one second. All right, so today on X, I posted a rant about reasonable doubt. It absolutely baffles my mind that jurors don't understand their role in the deliberation process. Just based on watching trials over the last year alone, I am starting to believe that probably most, if not all, convicted individuals in our country had juries that were not truly aware of what reasonable doubt means. As we've seen most recently with both the high profile cases of the Delphi homicides and the Karen Reed trial, jurors seem to think it's their job to speculate and come up with alternative theories while focusing on the most irrelevant things, like the defendant's facial expressions or what the lawyers were wearing. Seriously, that happened. That happened in the M Sheet podcast juror interview that I'm going to see if I can read it to you guys without getting copyright struck, perhaps. But yeah, so the juror there spoke a whole heck of a lot about people's clothing and fashion, and that was what she was interested in more so than the actual evidence in the case. So a juror's job is to determine the facts of the case and decide if what the state's theory, exactly as presented by the state, is reasonably feasible. If you, as a jury member, are left with many questions as to how, when, why, where the crimes were committed, then you have reasonable doubt. If you, the jury member, are creating alternative theories as to how, when, why, where the crimes were committed, then you have reasonable doubt. If you, the jury member, are thinking that the investigation was done poorly and you find the state's witnesses to be less than credible, then you have reasonable doubt. If you, the jury member, think that law enforcement might be biased towards the defendant or had tunnel vision without clearing other suspects, then you have reasonable doubt. If you, the jury member, have questions regarding the accuracy, reliability, or credibility of the state's scientific or investigative methods, i.e., leaf blowers and solo cups, Karen Reed trial, then you have reasonable doubt. If you, the jury member, wonder about the lack of direct evidence, like missing footage, lack of DNA, fingerprints, etc., then if you're wondering about that lack of direct evidence tying the defendant to the crimes, then you have reasonable doubt. If you, the jury member, don't believe the state's theory about the defendant's motive, or you think it makes no sense, then you have reasonable doubt. How many people are sitting in prison right now because a jury didn't understand this? Reform is necessary. We are in serious need of classes for jurors that they must pass in order to decide whether they get to lock someone up and take away their constitutional rights. Let me know your thoughts below. And yeah, I just have been thinking lately, juries make no sense. The jury members who get who go out and do interviews later on, like most of the time I'm left scratching my head. And this particular jury member from the Delphi trial really left a lot to be desired for a jury member for what you would hope would be picked for if you were sitting on a jury, or I'm sorry, if you were sitting on trial and you were picking your jury select, doing your jury selection, you would want like smart, bright, intelligent people who could put two sentences together. And this woman is not that. The woman who did the interview with the M sheet. And I mean, granted, she's young. She's very young, potentially gullible, naive, but still, I mean, n- no common sense. I just don't understand why we don't have common sense anymore in this country. It's very, very alarming that juries don't understand what reasonable doubt is. And if they have reasonable doubt, they still convict. A lot of times they also will do some kind of a compromise sentence, which or conviction, which is again, these are people's lives and their constitutional freedoms and rights that you're taking away from them if you convict someone. And you people really need to like be more vigilant in learning what to do if they are a juror, learning how they should, what learning the rules of etiquette, learning what they should and shouldn't be doing and how they should and shouldn't be analyzing things in the case. And I don't know. I'll just leave it at that. I really think that our jurors, we need we need total reform of our criminal justice system, but and this is probably the least likely to get reformed out of anything, but the way we have juries just doesn't make any sense. Joe Schmo off the street who has no common sense and can't tie his own shoes, you want him to be on a jury and decide whether someone broke a law or not. And if they did, then that person gets to take away all of their freedoms. Uh, it's such a scary thought to me that we have some of the comments from jurors that we've been getting lately. It's just so scary to me. So let me know what you guys think about juries these days and, how could we make the jury system better? What are your thoughts? Tell me in the comments below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye now.